Welcome back to Be on the Apex. Now, a slightly different setup today, and slightly different because it's just me, but Sam is ill today, so I decided I would do today's episode, or this week's episode, by myself, because also we are going off for Easter soon, so we're going to have 4 weeks where it's going to be mainly just me doing the content. So, yeah, let's talk about the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Obviously, I'm a little bit late getting this out again because it's nearly been a week. How has time actually gone so quickly? That's crazy. So yeah, the Saudi Grand Prix. There's so much to talk about in terms of race control. I mean, I'm literally going to be talking race control at you for probably the whole podcast, which is kind of good why Sam's not here, because he'd probably just want to leave anyway, because that's all I'm going to be talking about today. Because obviously that's something I'm really interested in, something I want to get into in the future. So yeah, that's going to be the main focus today. But we're also going to talk about what happened in the race. Like, there's certain things that we can really dive into and we can really chat about. So yeah, the fastest circuit. No, the fastest. Why can't? See, I need Sam here to get me going. But the fastest street circuit on the F1 calendar, 27 corners, the most corners on the F1 calendar again on a circuit. So always going to be an interesting race. I mean, you know, we've not been at Saudi that many times before, so it's an interesting race, to be fair, and it always has something, you know, something adds a bit of spice to the weekend. But yeah, I mean, race control was, I literally just spent an hour, that wasn't English, I literally just spent an hour Googling all the bits and details about the race control, and it really does make you wonder, like, are they okay? I think the FIA need a hug, because it's not going well for them. But anyway, I'm not going to prolong the intro any longer, let's get into it. So first of all, we've got top 3. We had Perez, P1, always great to see Perez on the podium again. What a great drive from him. You know, he led the race really well, he was out in front. What a great race from him. But to be fair, every race is good from him, because, you know, Red Bull, do you know what I mean? And then we had Verstappen, P2, coming back at us. Obviously he qualified P15 because of the drive shaft failure during quali. So obviously it was on and off if we were going to see him on the podium or not, but obviously, you know, world champion, what can you do, you know? From P15 to P2, what a drive. He actually ended up just under 5.5 seconds off of Perez as well, so if we would have had more laps, he would have definitely, I reckon anyway, been P1, which is an amazing feat to just do. Like, he's just, honestly, you know, you can hate Verstappen as much as you want, and people are going to have different opinions, and again, I'm not saying I'm a Red Bull fan or whatever, because obviously I'm very neutral, but as a driver you have to rate him, Verstappen that is, because what a drive. Like, he's just always constantly on his A game, and obviously I know he's got the right car and things, but yeah. And again, I think everyone was taken aback by, obviously at the start of the season, how competitive Aston Martin actually are. You know, everyone was saying during testing, obviously if you go back and watch the testing podcast, the first episode we ever did, we all thought, you know, they're going to come out of their shell, Aston Martin, because Stroll has put a lot of money into Aston Martin, you know, even with their factory at Silverstone. Oh my god, like, they've just put so much money into the best people, the best machinery, the best everything, that you'd like to think that it's going to go well for them. And obviously I think, you know, Alonso moving to Aston Martin, he definitely knew more than what he, you know, we all knew, like, what he was letting on. So yeah, I think, obviously I watched the race with the Motorsport Society. I watched the race with the Motorsport Society at uni, and everyone's so excited, because we've never seen an Aston Martin on the podium. Like, we never thought we'd see this in a million years, and here we are. You know, we've got Alonso on the podium and it's like, oh my gosh, because obviously long-term F1 fans, Alonso, what a great driver. You know, we've seen him on the podium before, we've seen him back in the day, you know, Lewis's debut and their fight for the championship, you know, and it's just so good to see him back up there, and it's so good to see Aston Martin so competitive as well. And that's another thing as well, obviously Stroll, everyone's got bad, you know, there was a bit of stipulation on Stroll. Stroll's not everyone's favourite driver half the time, you know, when you see people ranking their drivers, Stroll never really comes up that high. But I think you've got to give him credit, because he's driving that car not much off the pace of Alonso, you know, and that's something in itself. So we're definitely going to have to watch out for them this season, if not next season even more so, you know, that they could be the next Red Bull. You have no idea, obviously, with the testing and with all what goes on behind the scenes during the summer and winter break in terms of development. You never know, it's just one of those things. But Aston Martin this season, wow, they've really just come through and said, we're taking top spot for being coming out of nowhere. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, so now let's talk about quali. First of all, we've got Leclerc. Obviously he dropped 10 grid places because they used an additional power unit. You'd like to think, what are we now? The third race? Is it the third race of the season? Second race of the season, right? I'm just going mad. I've watched so much Formula E since before F1 started. Now I'm just like, I don't know what's going on. So, yeah. You'd like to think that, what are Ferrari doing, you know? Like, oh... It's honestly worrying, but you know, we'll let them off. We will let them off, as we always do. But obviously that was such a shame to see him drop down 10 places. But he did end up actually, wait, I've got the results right here. Obviously he got P7 in the race, so what a drive from him. Another interesting point we got from quali was that Sargent in the Williams didn't qualify in the 107% of the top time. So that's quite something. I don't think we've seen that very much before, to be honest, obviously, because we've got a lot of rookies this year. It's something that's probably more likely to happen, but obviously strange thing to see, because I thought Williams were actually doing quite well, but the stewards did say that he could race, obviously, because it's up to the stewards' discretion whether they race or not, because it's not really a regulation, it's just a rule. So I'll talk about that actually a bit now, because people don't really understand what that is. And I didn't actually understand what it was till I went to Austria with my dad, and his driver, who he was coaching, well, a lot of them in the Pro-Am class of the Porsche Super Cup, didn't actually get in the 107%. Why can't I say that? 107%, 107%, which meant that they couldn't race. And obviously, like, if they couldn't race, that's the whole class not being able to race. So obviously the stewards were like, well, fair enough, like, you can race. But yeah, so the rule is, I've got some notes here to keep me, so I'm not getting it wrong, but obviously I'm going to try and explain it the best I can. So it's a regulation. It's not in all types of motorsport, it's in some but not all, and it differs between, like, obviously F1 have got their own like rules and regulations, and so is everything else. So you have to, in qualifying, you have to qualify within 107% of the fastest lap time of the fastest car on track, right? 107%. And if you don't, then obviously the stewards can either say you can't race, or they say you can race in Sargent's case, but it does put you in that position that means you potentially might not be able to race. Now, why is that, you may ask? It's just to do with safety, to be honest. It's so that you don't have really slow cars on track, which then mean that they could create a hazard or, you know, a safety car or an issue. It's really just for safety reasons, you know, because if you've got people that are not as capable, especially in Formula 1, you know, if you're not as capable driving with some of the world's best drivers, then obviously that's going to be A, stupid, and B, very dangerous. So it's a really important rule to have. But obviously, like, we haven't actually seen that much across the last few seasons that I can actually remember anyway. I don't think we've seen it that much. It's not really a common thing, but yeah. Obviously there are exceptions to the rule, there always are. In in anything in terms of law, there are always exceptions or like loopholes. But the exceptions to this rule, obviously are like if you've got mechanical issues that mean that you can't set a competitive lap time, then obviously the steward's going to look at that and be like, well, fair enough, that was an issue that's not, it's not because of your ability as a driver, it's because of a certain circumstance that has meant that you can't set a fast lap, if that makes sense. You know, we've seen Sargent be a really competitive driver, especially in the Williams, you know, this year so far. So, you know, looking at the results of the races previous and how well he's actually done, I think, you know, the steward's just like, well, fair enough, it was an issue. So now let's get into the nitty-gritty race control drama, if that's what you want to call it, because to be fair, it is. We had 2 DNFs this race. We had Stroll and we had Albon. So I'm going to talk about Stroll now. You know, he DNF'd on lap 18. It's gonna be very opinion based, this as well, you know, but he DNF'd on lap 18 because they developed a critical problem with the engine and the car. So the engineer came on the radio and said, you know, stop the car immediately, we can't go any further. And fair enough, so he went off the track into the runoff zone, and then obviously pulled up pretty much in a really easy place to be recovered, right? I actually, on Sky, it literally showed you so well, like, you know, he just pulled up into the runoff area, away from the racing line, and he could be towed away so easily without them even pretty much getting onto the track that much. Like, it wasn't that big of a deal. But obviously, we saw a safety car in this situation. Now, again, I'm saying I was watching with the Motorsport Society and there was quite a lot of us there. Everyone was like, everyone took a minute and was like, what? If anything, you know, virtual safety car would make more sense, but a safety car? There's no marshals on track, hardly. It's so easy to tow the car away. You literally move it 5 centimetres or whatever it was. No, centimetres, that's like that. But you literally move it not even that far and you're off the track, so it made no sense, right? This is another thing, right? This is what I was researching, and I actually did hear it during the race. The FIA said that their cameras didn't show the exact location of the car on the track. So they thought, fair enough, they thought it was safer to deploy the safety car because they didn't understand where the car was on track and where it had stopped. I can see it from both sides, right? You want to be safe, you want to make sure it's okay, because obviously they've had issues in the past where they haven't been safe and it's gone wrong for them. But in this circumstance, you know, all us viewers could see from Sky Sports that this car was on the runoff area, pretty much off the track already. Stroll had literally driven in, then driven, like, literally off the track. I don't understand. And also, you like to think in the 21st century, you know, why can't we have cameras that show you exactly where the cars are on track? Like, surely you know where the, like, from what I've experienced in race control of club meetings, you can see where the cars are on the track, so you know it's going to be at, I don't know, turn 1 or whatever. Like, surely you're going to have a camera somewhere, or a drone, or a helicopter camera, showing you that car is not actually on track, or, well, it's on track, but it's not anywhere near the racing line, therefore there is no need for a safety car. If anything, deploy the virtual safety car, or double yellow flag that sector. But really, was a safety car necessary? I don't think so. And I never say this, I never give off, obviously, anything bad about the FIA. I have nothing bad to say because obviously I want to work in the FIA, but that was a mistake. I know we're all human and we make mistakes, but that was bad. But they did admit to that, fair enough, they admitted to it. But, you know, there's more issues where that came from. So now let's go on to the whole Alonso drama. If you are a motorsport fan, then you pretty much will know what happened last weekend with Alonso. Obviously, he got P3. Everyone was over the moon, ecstatic about that. But then the FIA had to come back in and say, no, actually, he's got a 10-second time penalty for not serving the penalty that he had previously right. Okay? So obviously, Alonso had first a penalty because he was in the incorrect grid position at the start, obviously he'd driven, I think it was over the line, I can't remember. He wasn't in the incorrect position, but that's what they say. But he was like over the line, I think, anyway, because it's really hard to see. Like I always struggle, especially in a kart, to be able to see the line, to make sure you're actually like on the line. But he was, oh, I remember now, he was pretty much like over to the, I think it was left hand side of his box, so pretty much not in his box. But that's why. So he got a penalty, which is fair enough. Which he then went to serve, and this is where the issue occurred. You know, he went to serve it, and obviously they waited 5 seconds before they could actually work on the car. But what was it? It was the rear jack that they touched. The rear jack man touched the back of the Aston Martin during the 5 seconds, right? Because this is where there's issues with the rules and the FIA. You know, in the regulations it states that you can't work, in quotation marks, on the car during a penalty, which is like fair enough, right? But Aston Martin were arguing in this instance that, you know, putting the rear jack on the car is not working on the car, therefore they're not impeding on this rule. You know, that they are doing the penalty, they are seeing through the penalty in the right way. So that was the issue. So basically, in F1 or in most types of motorsport, teams and drivers and other stakeholders have a right to review. That's what they call it. So it means that they can obviously go back on, like they can essentially lodge an appeal, but it's not on appeal, but they lodge an appeal against the decisions made during a race if they're seen to be not of merit, say. And that's what Aston Martin did in this circumstance. You know, they submitted video evidence showing that yes, the rear jack man did touch the car with the jack. I keep doing that. I hope you get what I mean by that. Like, you know, it's the one at the back, and he's like, and it lifts the car for them to then do the tyres, if that makes sense. Yeah, so they obviously said, yeah, that's fair enough, but it's not, they didn't work on the car during the penalty, so how did they, it's not wrong. That's where the grey area is in the regulations, you know, working on the car and touching the car. It's very different, and it can be interpreted in different ways, right? So obviously this lack of clarity within the regulations is so obscene that the panel of stewards that they got to review the decision basically said that, yeah, fair enough, that shouldn't have been a penalty, and he got back to third, which everyone was happy about. I don't know if any of you saw, what was it? I think it was like on George Russell's Instagram post. He posted a picture of him holding the trophy saying, like, Alonso, what's your address or something. I thought that was really funny. And he, like, I keep seeing so many TikToks of him like just shining the trophy, being like, I'll give it back to you, Alonso. Like, you know, it's all fun and games really to them. Well, not really, but you know, the social media aspect of it is really good. I think they've really picked it up this season. But yeah, so the FIA really did mess up in that situation. But they did actually say, I think I found an article or something. No, I found an article. I'm not going to play that down. I found an article when I was reviewing that said that they are going to go back and look at all these issues in the regulations where there are grey areas, because trust me, it's not just there. I look through regulations now, right, for motorsport, and I think that could be taken in one of two ways. That's not straight to the point. You know, learning law now, I studied law. Everything, well, not everything again, but most things, you know, are this is this, this is this, this is this, this is the exception, that's it. Makes sense, right? Whereas motorsport, it's like, oh no, working on the car, but like, how is working on the car touching the car? How is touching the car working on the car? I don't get it. But here we are. It's just one of those things, isn't it? But it makes it more interesting, so I'm not complaining. So because Alonso regained his third position, it meant that actually Aston Martin now move ahead of Mercedes in the team standings, you know, so that's quite something. And what was it, Alonso, I think he holds third now in the driver championship. He gained 3 points, so yeah, for being third instead of fourth. And I think he's now third in the driver standings, so, you know, all the George Russell fans out there are a bit sad about that, but you know, it's quite something. I mean, again, it just shows you how competitive Aston Martin are this year, and I'm so excited to see how, you know, if we see an Aston Martin on the podium pretty much every race, that's going to be so fun. Can you imagine? Who would have thought this? Who would have thought this? Last year, no thought in the world about this. So obviously today is the 23rd of March, which is actually really funny. Today I'm filming this on the 23rd of March, and the FIA actually stated that at their Sporting Advisory Committee today, on the 23rd of March, they're going to review all the issues in the regulations, all the grey areas, all the issues that actually arose at Saudi, technically, not all the issues. I'm putting them in such a green light here. No, they're going to review the issues that they had in Saudi and Saudi, and make sure they're not ever going to happen. Well, ever. Make sure they're not going to happen again at their committee meeting. So that's good, because that's before the Australian Grand Prix, which hopefully means that we won't see that again. But I mean, to be fair, it's just one of those things, isn't it? It's like, it probably won't happen again. Well, it probably might happen again, because there's always going to be people think you should get a penalty or you shouldn't. So there's always going to be that like tension. You know, teams don't want penalties, but the FIA have to give them in certain circumstances. So teams are always going to argue their case, but obviously sometimes it's not going to go through. But yeah, hopefully it means that we'll see more of a clarity basically in the regulations, which is good for me, because then when I come to work in the regulations, it'll be clearer and I won't have to deal with the stress of this. But that's not true, because it's always going to be a stressful industry, but that's what makes it fun, and that's why I love it. Right, so I'm going to stop talking now, because I feel like I've been talking for a long time, and also because it's literally just me today, I'm not going to make you sit here and listen to me talk endlessly for over half an hour, which it might be, to be fair, at this point, but we'll see. So hopefully I will be back with Sam soon, and we can discuss races and other things. You know, Beyond the Apex is not just about the race, hence why we talked pretty much all about the FIA and decisions today. But it's because I literally love it. I don't know if you know that when I'm on a roll, I don't know if you can tell, when I talk about the regulations and I get on a roll, I'm on a roll, and I look at the time on the camera and I'm like, it's actually been 8 minutes. Poor old editing me is not going to love this, but yeah. So I'm going to close it off there. Great race in Saudi. Obviously I didn't talk about all the drivers like I'd normally do with Sam, because today I really wanted to focus on the regulations, and I hope that makes sense for you guys, but I hope it was interesting as well. It saves you having to go and Google all the stuff that I had to Google before this. So keep up with the podcast. I'm gonna post a lot more videos in terms of just normal YouTube videos as well, so just keep up with that, and yeah, I'll see you soon. Thanks for watching.